Hey folks, this is the premiere edition of Cowboy Wisdom. We're tickled to death that you're listening to us, and hopefully some of the things that we impart with you will help you in your daily battle. A little bit about myself. I grew up on a ranch in central New Mexico, about 9 miles north of a real small town called Mountain Air, New Mexico. And I guess the best place to start is from the beginning. We had horses and cows, and we also farmed 200 acres for feed for our own cows. Well, when you have all of that going on, things are going to happen. And boy, did they. The earliest memory I have is my younger brother. It seemed like I was always talking him into something. And I talked him into one day that if we tied an old blanket around his neck, then he could fly like Superman. Well, the chute, which is a alleyway that you push the cows down to load them into the semi-trailers, which have two levels, an upper level and a lower level. And the way my dad had our chute fixed, it rose and lowered depending on which level of the semi-trailer that you were filling. So the post that held the chute was tall. It was probably 10, maybe 12 feet tall. So I talked my little brother into tying this cape around his neck, and we climbed him up there, got him on top of that post, and I went back down, and I said, well, you jump off, and I'll see how far you fly. Well, he did. But he came straight down. There was no flying to it. And when he hit, his chin hit his knee. And he bit clean through his tongue. So he was standing there bawling, blood spattering everywhere because he was shaking his head, crying. And I had an old dirty handkerchief in my mouth. So I took him to the horse trough, got it wet, tried to wash off the blood best I could, and wrap it around his tongue. But I knew I had to get him looking a little better before I took him into my mom. So he's still bawling, and I take him into mom, and she sees the blanket tied around his neck, and is like, what on earth were you boys doing? And so I told her we thought he could fly. When he fell, when he jumped, he hit his knee on his chin and bit right through his tongue. So my mom was like, well, we got to take him to Mountain Air to the doctor. Mountain Air had an old country doctor. His name was Robert J. Saul, and he was just that. Carried the little black bag, did house calls. He was just an old-time country doc. So we got him in there, and Dr. Saul told my mom, he says, well, we can't stitch that. You can't put stitches in the tongue. Fortunately, it will grow back together really soon, because it just had one little strip on the right and one little strip on the left that was holding the end of his tongue together. And so he, told my mom to watch for infection and all the normal things. But for the next week, he had to have his food pureed and sucked out of a straw because he couldn't eat. Well, sure enough, Dr. Saul was right. in a couple weeks, he had graduated up to real soft mashed potatoes and real soft mashed carrots and that kind of stuff. And by about the end of the third, beginning of the fourth week, well, he was almost back to normal. But these are the adventures you get into when you live, well, as we used to say, we didn't live in the middle of nowhere, but you could see it from our house. And, of course, it was quite a while before I could talk him into doing anything else. He wised up, well, for a little while. He wised up pretty quick there for a little while. But the catch-22 to all of this is you have to kind of take care of your little brother because your next neighbor is several miles away and they don't have little kids. So we were all we had to play with and to get in trouble with was each other. And man, did we get in trouble. He and I are only 18 months apart. We're Irish twins. And what one of us didn't think of, well, the other one did. So consequently, we were always cleaning up somebody before we took them to the house to see my mom. Now, I don't want to give you guys the idea that my mom just turned us hog wild loose and didn't care what we were doing. That was not the case at all. At all. My mom was a great mom. But, you know, she had to cook, clean, sweep, mop, all the things that moms do. And often she had to go with my dad and help him do something and check the cows. We had about 300 head of mama cows. And so she'd have to go with my dad. But because my dad was very crippled. He had a hereditary disease called ankylosing spondylitis, which I have inherited and am now fighting. But he was very crippled. So he depended pretty heavy on my mom. And of course, you know, we would go outside to play and we got the usual lecture, don't you boys be doing anything dumb. Don't be trying to fly off a 12-foot pole or anything like that. Well, the warning lasted about 30 minutes, and then you were looking for things to do. And my little brother, ever since he was knee-high to a short sheep, he had a rope in his hand constantly. He roped everything from chickens to horses, whatever he could stick his loop on. And most of the time, he wasn't big enough to hold down whatever he caught. So I had to be there to bail him out. And we'll get into that in another podcast. Because some of them are fairly lengthy stories. But, you know, we rode horses and helped my dad move cows to wherever he needed them to move to. And we lived, as the crow flies, about 2.5 miles from my papa and granny. Well, my papa had a skin cancer come under his left eye, and back then they treated it with cobalt radiation, and he had a really bad reaction to the cobalt, and so he had a hole in the side of his head that you could stick your fist into. And twice a day, my grandma would dress it and take the cotton balls out and put clean cotton balls in and cover it with a patch. And so he only had one eye. But he was just like my dad. He didn't know nothing but cows and horses. he didn't want to know anything but cows and horses. And my dad was the exact same way, which is why I'm sure he and his father-in-law got along so well, because my dad's dad, my dad was 9 years old when his dad died of a massive heart attack. Well, my grandmother didn't handle things very well, and consequently, my dad and his older brother, they got to go to school till about the 8th and ninth grade, because she was always pulling them out of school to move cows or farm or work or whatever needed to be done. And so he didn't get a very good education. And my papa, my grandpa, on my mom's side, well, he wasn't a whole lot better. He could sign his name, but I seen my dad look at a cow, and he could tell you, and he never missed, ever. He could tell you within 5 pounds of what she weighed, how old she was, and if she was with calf or not, and how far along she was. And that was no joke. He had that kind of an eye for cattle. And that's all my grandpa ever did too, was, work cattle and train horses and those kinds of things. And of course my dad's mom, she also ranched and had, about 100 head of mama cows, and she drove the school bus. She drove the school bus that we rode into town every day, pardon me. And we had to drive 7 miles to meet her to catch the bus. And we caught the bus at 6:45. So my brother and I, we got up every morning at about 5:15, 5:20, because my dad always kept dogie calves. And if you don't know what a dogie calf is, it's a calf that doesn't have a mama. And he would buy 5 or 6, 7 dogie calves, and we always had milk cows. And so me and my brother, of course, we milked by hand. We would be out in the barn milking, and then we mixed cow's milk with a supplement called Suckle, which is basically like baby formula, and feed all those dogie calves, because if we needed a new pair of tires for the truck or something like that came up, which it always did, my dad would grab up a couple of those dogie calves and sell them instead of taking his herd calves off the ranch. So we got up, and I can never remember milking less than 3 cows. Most of the time it was 4, sometimes 5, just depending. And then of course we always took a 2-gallon bucket to the house, because my mom would strain it, because you have to strain it, and put it in the refrigerator and let it set, and all the cream rises to the top. Well, she would take the cream off, and we would sell the extra milk for $1.25 a gallon. And of course, with the cream, when we were sitting around at night, which wasn't too long, because we went to bed because the next day came real early, but we would sit there and turn the churn and make butter. And my mom would squeeze that butter out, get all the milk out of it, so the butter didn't sour, and of course put it in the refrigerator. And then we always had 4 to 5 hogs, because my mom preferred pork for breakfast meat instead of beef, so we had always 4 to 5 hogs and about 100 chickens. And so Randy and I, my brother and I, we got up every morning, milk the cows,